and striking a balance on immigration policy. That's what President Biden says his goal is as he announces sweeping protection for illegal immigrants just about a week after taking other executive action at the southern border. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao. Good evening, Iris. So what is this latest executive order that the president has issued today?
Good evening to you, Steve. So President Biden today announced a new sweeping executive action that would allow illegal immigrants who are married to U.S. citizens or who have a parent who are to apply for a green card right here in the U.S. without having to leave the country. And these applicants must have been living in the U.S. for the past 10 years at least. And President Biden, at an event celebrating DACA's anniversary, today says today's move is to protect these families. Watch.
Paying taxes, contributing to our country for 10 years or more, all this time, with fear and uncertainty. We can fix that, and that's what I'm going to do today. Fix it.
And the Biden administration says today's move will provide legal status for about 500,000 people. It comes as President Biden is seeking to appeal to Latino voters who are key to his re-election bid. It also comes as Biden's giving an olive branch to immigration advocates who have been criticizing Biden's another executive action he announced just 2 weeks ago that sought to limit asylum at the southern border. And Biden today highlighting the caveats in his new executive order, stressing that he's not going to sacrifice border security. Watch.
Requires them to pass the criminal background checks, and it doesn't apply to anyone trying to come here today. I refuse to believe that to secure our border, we have to walk away from being in America.
But still, Republicans are sharply criticizing President Biden for his new order today. Former President Trump's campaign, for example, accused Biden of creating a new invitation for illegal immigration. And Senator Josh Hawley is also threatening to investigate Biden's policy if Republicans take back the Senate after the election. And today's action, along with Biden's new executive order today, will surely be a major focus during next week's debate between Biden and Trump. Steve.
So, Iris, any executive action of any president is subject to fierce pushback and litigation, as we saw with former President Trump in the border wall, up against a lot of lawsuits and stifling that project. If you could, give us an idea of the scope of today's order and what the likelihood of it facing legal challenges may be.
Right, like you pointed out, it's not a rare incident that the president's executive orders can get challenged legally. And today the White House insisted, however, that President Biden's action today sits squarely within his legal authorities. But just like how you pointed out, President Biden undid a lot of Trump's immigration policies. The same thing could happen to Biden's new executive order today, especially given the fact that it could take a very long time for these new applications to come in and get processed eventually. So it remains to be seen whether today's promises to these American families would actually come true. Back to you, Steve.
NTD's Iris Tao from the North Lawn of the White House. Thank you, Iris. Senators are investigating the origins of the COVID-19 virus. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez was at Capitol Hill today earlier for the hearing.
The Senate's Committee on Homeland Security heard testimony from 4 experts as part of its investigation into the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic. During his opening remarks, Democratic Senator Gary Peters, the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee in the Senate, highlighted the challenges that Americans faced during the health emergency.
As Americans navigated the COVID-19 pandemic, they endured changing healthcare guidance, uncertainty and misinformation about how to best protect themselves and their families from this deadly virus.
Republican senators like Senator Ron Johnson focused their line of questioning on the subgrants from the NIH and NIAID that ended up funding research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology in China that some Republicans believe constitutes gain-of-function research.
Really trying to get at is the purpose of this hearing, is asking the question, should we be funding, should we be engaged, should we be regulating to a much greater extent gain-of-function research?
Biodefense expert Gregory Koblenz supported the natural transmission COVID-19 origin theory, but also highlighted that the lack of transparency from the Chinese regime makes any determination near impossible.
I believe the available evidence points most strongly to a natural zoonotic spillover event as the origin of the pandemic. However, a research-related accident can't be ruled out at this time. A key obstacle to more definitive conclusion is the lack of transparency exercised by the Chinese government which affects assessments of both potential pathways to the pandemic.
Two other experts who testified argue in favor of the lab leak COVID-19 origin theory. The split views demonstrate the controversial aspect of the investigation. I spoke with Republican Senator Roger Marshall, and he argued that the investigation should be taken off the spotlight.
Really what the next step is a 9/11 style commission. There's too many bright lights here. There's too many cameras. It's too political. We need to get this outside of Washington, D.C. and investigate this. And then how do we prevent the next pandemic from happening?
I also spoke with Republican Senator Rick Scott from Florida, and he agreed that the U.S. government should better define and better regulate gain-of-function research. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
And to further assess the origins of that virus that killed millions of people in our country and beyond, we're joined now live by John Leake, author and investigative reporter. John Leake, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you, John. The Senate Committee on Homeland Security, as we just saw, holding a full committee hearing today on the origins of COVID-19. I want to play a clip of Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri questioning one of those doctors who testified today and get your response on the other side. Looks like we're having a little bit of trouble there, John.
Is that what happened?
It's just the scientific method.
Oh, it's just science. Oh, it's the scientific method that happened at lightning speed and then was used to propagandize and lie to and shut down. As a scientist who's supposedly supposed to follow facts, do you regret the fact that your work was used to censor your fellow scientists? It was used to censor ordinary Americans who ask questions about the virus. Do you regret that?
When you write a paper, I mean, you get it in the journal. We can't control what happens after.
Oh, I see. So you're not responsible at all. It's amazing. Nobody who is involved in any of this is responsible. Never.
It's pretty strong words from the senator there. Do you expect there to be any accountability coming out of this hearing?
Well, it looks like more of this careful choreography. The final kind of equivocation is that, well, gee whiz, we might be able to get to the bottom of this if it only weren't for the Chinese and their lack of cooperation. I don't believe that. I think that the political establishment in Washington knows just how much American biotechnology played a role in this. One of the experts, it was Stephen Quay, a PhD and MD. He was formerly on the faculty of the Stanford University School of Medicine. I mean, he was unequivocal. I mean, he pointed to the mountain of rather obvious evidence that this indeed came out of the lab, but it wasn't only Chinese biotechnicians, it was their colleagues at the University of North Carolina. Ralph Barrick played a key role in this, as did Peter Daszak at EcoHealth Alliance. The problem is that the NIH, the NIAID, Anthony Fauci's outfit, has been fully aware, fully apprised of this, and has even played a key role in terms of grant funding. So I think the liability is just too big, and everyone on Capitol Hill knows that. And so we're going to continue to get this choreography with no definitive answers.
John, separately, you've investigated the incidents of fatal cardiac arrest in young people, particularly athletes on the field and beyond. Has there been a genuine uptick, or is this in the realm of normal and we just never paid too much attention to it? Talk to us about what you found.
Well, I should say that it's my co-author and medical scientific colleague, Dr. Peter McCullough, who is himself a practicing cardiologist. He has done the exhaustive research on this, and he has treated young athletes in his clinical practice. I mean, there's overwhelming evidence that the CDC itself acknowledges the elevated risk of myocarditis, particularly in young males. This is no longer in the least bit controversial. I think the only thing our political establishment is obscuring is the prevalence of it. We continue to hear this obfuscation that these incidents are rare or are transitory. In fact, has been a statistically significant increase of myocarditis, particularly in young males, since these COVID-19 vaccines were rolled out.
John, I also want to get your thoughts on the issue of alternative therapeutics and early treatment. That was not discussed. It's not discussed too much, but do you think that this is something that needs to be factored into the discussion, looking back at how to prevent future pandemics and treat them if, in fact, they do emerge?
Well, yes, and again, I have to refer to the seminal work of my co-author, Dr. Peter McCullough, who wrote the first peer-reviewed published paper on early treatment modalities for COVID-19 illness. We document in our book, The Courage to Face COVID-19, how these doctors, independent doctors, such as Dr. McCullough, there was a Yale epidemiologist, Harvey Risch, a practicing physician, Harvard trained in the California Central Valley, George Fareed. They all pointed out in a hearing on November the 19th, 2020, incidentally, Gary Peters was the minority chairman of that hearing, in which they present exhaustive evidence that, in fact, early treatment modalities for COVID-19 did work, did prevent hospitalization and death, but the same organized interest that has pushed this COVID-19 vaccine so relentlessly, we saw this same interest group suppress early treatment. That's not a theory. There is an abundance of evidence to support that. Suppress early treatment in order to promote mass vaccination.
John Leake, really appreciate your perspective. Thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.